You are listening to the Overthinker's Guide to Joy, episode 38. This is the one where I'm going to talk all about the lessons I learned from my high school reunion. Let's dive in. This is a podcast for overthinkers, overdoers, and overachievers who are tired of feeling overanxious and just want to feel better. I'm your host, certified life coach, Jackie Dukrenis. Hey there, and welcome back. So I had a big milestone this weekend. I went to my 40th high school reunion. And well, technically, it was not the reunion of my own high school, which sounds really weird. And it's kind of a long story, but the short story of the long story is this. I grew up in a small suburb of Los Angeles, and I grew up in a really tight-knit community. And my brothers and my sister and I all went to the same elementary school and junior high school, and then they graduated from this one high school, went off to college, and there was a big age gap between us. And when I got ready to go to that same high school, my dad got remarried and my new stepmother insisted that he sell our family home, and we moved across town where I attended a different high school. And the truth is, it might as well have been across the country because the Valley was such a different world from the west side of Los Angeles that I felt like I had been cut off from my entire upbringing, just being maybe 10 miles away, but no means to really get back and reconnect with my high school friends or what would have been my high school friends. So it was a really rocky road for me, my first year of high school, because I didn't know anyone and I was kind of starting over in a new house and in a new town and in a new school. And my stepmother was sort of something right out of a Disney movie in her portrayal of the evil stepmother. And thankfully, the marriage did not last very long. And the truth is, high school got much better after their divorce, but it was never quite the same as I had imagined it would have been had we just stayed put and had I gone to school with all the kids that I had grown up with. So my husband was sort of baffled as I flew in to attend this high school reunion for a high school that, again, I never attended. But the interesting thing was I was not the only one. A number of my closest friends had not gone to this high school either. And just like me, for a variety of different reasons, families moved or parents got divorced or they ended up going to private schools or some other circumstance. But many of us who ended up in different areas and different schools always felt this kinship to this town that we grew up in and always felt like this was the high school we were supposed to go to, whether or not we did. So over the years, I stayed in touch with a number of people from that school and then kind of lost touch because as we became adults and got jobs and families and I don't know, life happens and you just start making new friends in new circumstances. But many of us actually reconnected later. And some of that was due to things like classmates.com and Facebook and all kinds of social media that allowed us to be connected, at least virtually. And some of us actually stayed in touch when we'd be in town and we would visit or have lunch or dinners or what have you. So this high school reunion for me was not so much a high school reunion, but a reunion with my childhood. I saw friends from elementary school. There were so many of us. I think there were 6 of us who came to the reunion who all went to kindergarten together. I saw friends from junior high school, from college, some from the entertainment industry, and many of the friends I ran into still live within 10 miles of where we grew up. And then there was the fact that this was the first big party many of us have attended since the pandemic outbreak over 2 years ago. So it was just a really special night, and it was really nostalgic. And it was also kind of fascinating. There were so many faces I remembered the second I saw them. It was as if time had stopped and they looked exactly like they did 40 plus years ago. And then there were many people who looked like much older versions of themselves. And then there were people who didn't look anything like they looked in junior high school. And then there were some people who kind of looked like themselves, but kind of a older plastic version of themselves, which was a cautionary tale of bad plastic surgery for sure. But none of it mattered. It was just connection, community, nostalgia. And like there was no pretense. It didn't matter what people looked like or where they lived or what they were doing or what had happened. It was just amazing. And the event was outdoors and the dress was casual, and it was like this beautiful, warm summer night in the valley, which reminded me very much of my happiest memories as a kid. And it was interesting to see what and who people remembered, as much as what and who they didn't remember. One of my friends from kindergarten told me a story that he remembered about coming to my house in elementary school. And we apparently wandered over to a construction site across the street where there had been a tractor. And he said we crawled up onto the tractor and we played with the gear shift, and the tractor started to roll, and he freaked out and he peed in his pants. And then he called his mom because he had to go home. And I have zero recollection of this. I remember him. I remember him coming to my house. I remember being good friends. I remember that he had bright blue eyes and long eyelashes, and I knew his name. I remember where he lived, but I have no recollection of this incident. And it's interesting because here we are at, 58 years old, and he carries this memory with like such shame and embarrassment. And I don't remember anything about it. And in another instance, I was nervous about running into a boy that I had gone on a few dates with in the summer when I turned 15 years old. And he was a little bit older than me. And he was like the first guy I knew to get his driver's license. And he had a car. And I feel like it was a Trans Am with like flames on the hood or something like that. It was very 1970s. But I just remember feeling so grown up on this date with a boy with a car. And I don't remember a lot about how I felt about him. I think I was just more excited to be able to go on an actual date. And I think it was like maybe our second time we had gone out, and we went miniature golfing at this big Castle Park golf course, amusement park, arcade thingy. And we had a really nice time. And then we ran into a big group of friends later just hanging out. He had taken notice of the fact that I had gone out of my way to say hi to one of the other boys who he was friends with. We were both friends with him, and he didn't like it. And he got in a really dark mood, and he's like, let's just go. And he took me home, and he said, well, it's obvious you're more interested in him than me, so I don't think there's any point in going out again. And I was really embarrassed and a little defensive, and mostly because he was right. But I always felt like a certain amount of shame about this. And so at the reunion, when I bumped into him, I said, I think I owe you an apology. We went on a date about 1,000,000 years ago, and it didn't end well. And he looked at me with a big smile and absolutely had no recollection of me or the date. And he gave me a big hug, and he goes, it's all good. And he just laughed. And that was it. And I was like, wow, I've thought about that like about 1,000,000 times in the last 40 plus years. And apparently it was no big deal to him. So in another instance, one of my friends told me that a woman had come up to him and thanked him. They had been friendly in high school. I don't know how close, but she told him that he had a profound impact on her life and that he made her strive to be a better person. He had absolutely no idea in what way he could have possibly impacted her life, but he accepted the compliment with, great appreciation. And then later he said to me, we tend to think that other people are supporting players in a movie about us, but sometimes we realize that we are a supporting player in a movie about them. And it's amazing, again, what we hold on to and what we don't. And then in another situation, I bumped into one of the really popular girls from junior high school. This was the girl who had like long blonde feathered hair, kind of like Farrah Fawcett, and all the cute boys loved her. And the weird thing was, from afar, she looked exactly the same. Same blonde feathered hair that she had in the late 70s. And it wasn't until I got close up and realized that with all the lip fillers and Botox injections and breast enhancements, she kind of looked like an older wax museum version of her teenage self. But she was still sweet and she was still kind. And you could kind of see like probably why all the guys fell all over her. But the best part of this reunion was how everyone seemed to be genuinely happy to be there. One of the organizers who had put together the whole party had also put together a slideshow tribute in memoriam of all of our friends who had passed away since high school. And it was so shocking how many of them there were, and actually quite humbling, because what it did was it created this great sense of collective gratitude that we were here, still here, and that we had this opportunity to gather and reconnect. And a number of people commented on how they almost didn't come. They were hesitant to show up for so many reasons. And this just resonated so deeply with me because I hear this all the time. People's fear of social anxiety was a big one. People's fear that they wouldn't know anyone, or that they would have to make small talk, or of being judged, or that they were struggling in some way, either physically or emotionally, and they just didn't know if they could show up and be comfortable. And yet, everyone stayed longer than they expected. Everyone found someone to talk to and someone to reconnect with. And in some cases, I found myself getting to know people that I kind of barely knew way back when, but we ended up having so much in common because we have a shared history. Favorite places to go, favorite people we knew. And it was interesting because many people now are grandparents, or they have adult children, or some are divorced. Some had never married at all. And again, none of it mattered. We all just felt connected walking down memory lane. And the weird thing was, like 40 or 40 plus years, because some of these people I hadn't seen in 50 years, seemed like a blip. And it was like, oh yeah, I had this college experience and long career and marriages and kids and different homes and different friends and some really difficult times in my life, including losses of loved ones and terrible heartbreaks. But I also had celebrations and a million other experiences. And suddenly here I was putting all that life into this like little distilled down 2-minute elevator pitch so that we could try to remember what connected us way back when, what we had in common now, and where we used to like to hang out and what we used to like to do and who we wanted to hang out with and who we had crushes on and what we liked to eat and what we liked to watch. And we got so swept up in our conversations that my group of friends, we never even walked over to have the buffet dinner. So all of a sudden it was like 11 o'clock at night. Oh no, we'd been there 5 hours already and we were just starving. So a couple of us got in the car and went to an In-N-Out Burger to get burgers and fries. And it felt like we were teenagers again. And I don't expect most high school reunions to be like this. Like I said, for me, it wasn't about high school because I didn't even go to this school. It was more like a family reunion of long-lost cousins. And one of my closest friends said it best. People from this community share the same DNA. It's kind of like we're family. And a few weeks ago, I did a podcast about how the pandemic has impacted or may have impacted our ability to socialize because we may have forgotten how. And since this was the first big gathering I've been to since the pandemic and so many others, I was so grateful that the conversations weren't strained and the reconnections felt easy. But it also reminded me of how much I missed in-person conversations and going to parties. But my biggest takeaway was the reminder of how important it is to have a community. High school was not fun for everyone. In fact, my first year of high school away from all my friends was particularly painful. I had lost my community, but eventually built another one. And depending on our circumstances, we might have to rebuild a sense of community many times in our lives. Because community comes in many forms. It might be where you grew up, but it might be where you work or where you play. It might be in your neighborhood. It might be a church, a temple, or even a yoga studio. It might be old friends. It might be new friends. It might be family. But having community is like a super important part of being a human being. And people who you connect with on some level due to common interests or common backgrounds or common values, that's what matters. That's what creates community. So this reunion reminded me of how important it is for all of us to connect to others. We are social beings. And while some of us are introverts and some of us are extroverts and some of us are ambiverts, it's still important that we feel a sense of community by finding common interests or common passions or common history. And sometimes community is as simple as sharing a late night burger and fries at a picnic table and reconnecting to the joy of feeling like you're a teenager again. So I invite you this week to reach out and connect with someone from your past or someone new that you share an interest with. Create or recreate your community with somebody who would definitely benefit from it too. All right, friends, I hope you have a great week. I look forward to talking to you next time, and bye for now. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Overthinker's Guide to Joy. If you're enjoying these episodes, please subscribe or follow this podcast so you can always be in the know when the next episode drops. If you would like to learn more about working with me as a coach, you can connect with me through my website at JackieDeGrenis.com. That's JackieDeGrenis.com.